Dr. Price, Street Epistemology. We're talking about my good friend Anthony Magnabosco, about how he approaches people on the streets and kind of probes them to think for themselves about what they believe. But you were saying something amazing about Socrates. So
yeah, that's what he did, and why he was the gadfly of Athens. And he would approach people in the street and get them conversing. And in a way, he would tie them in knots, but he was just trying to get them to follow through on what they thought, to see if maybe they ought to rethink it. And so once, like, he was up on charges of impiety, which is what eventually got him executed. He knew that was coming, and he wasn't sure. I mean, how am I going to defend myself? And so he knows this young Athenian yuppie named Euthyphro has accused his own father of impiety, and so he's up on charges. So he's waiting for him, and says, Euthyphro, you're just the guy I wanted to see. And, what, can I help you, Socrates? And he says, yeah, I hear you have accused your own father of impiety. Well, I've been accused of the same thing, but I'm not sure what it means. Could you help me out? Because you must know if you're able to, accuse your own father of it. That's pretty serious. He says, oh, sure, I'll be happy to help you. Impiety is something that the gods hate. So if you're doing what they hate, that's impious. That is how you pronounce it, by the way. It's not impious, it's impious. And he says, oh, okay, that makes sense, Euthyphro. But the Iliad tells us that the gods don't all hate the same thing. I mean, some of them were in favor of Troy, some of Greece. Was one side wrong? How could the gods be wrong? And he says, yeah, I see what you mean, Socrates. Let's say impiety is doing something that all the gods are agreed on is bad and that they hate. All right, yeah. One other thing, though, why do they hate it? Do they hate some kind of act, murder, whatever, because it's already wrong and they obey a higher moral law? Or is it wrong just because they say it is? They don't happen to like it. Like, next week maybe they could say, I'm kind of tired of this. How about thou shalt kill? I mean, could they do that? I mean, is that all it takes? And then Euthyphro basically looks at his wrist sundial and says, gee, I got to run, Socrates, goodbye. And that's what he was trying to get Euthyphro to see, that maybe there's nothing to this accusation. And he saw that coming, Euthyphro did, and so he doesn't want to be exposed, not only to Socrates, but to himself, right? He doesn't want to recognize that his beliefs are groundless. So that's street epistemology, and he would do the same thing on all kinds of other things, like so-and-so is beautiful, like some temple prostitute walks by and some guy says, and he says, well, she's beautiful, isn't she? Yeah, I'll say. You ever wonder what makes somebody or something beautiful? And so that he tries to narrow down what beauty is and all that. Love, the color red, anything. And he didn't really have answers, but Plato, his disciple, did. And that he used Socrates' street epistemology as a jumping off point to say, well, I think I can explain why we're all agreed pretty much on what beauty is, because there's an eternal form of beauty that doesn't change, even though individual beautiful people will grow less beautiful, etc., etc. So he tried to give answers to it, but Socrates was just saying, have you ever really thought about this? And I found in teaching religion classes or ethics classes that students are just happy to admit they believe what they believe because their parents or their priest or whoever told them, and they don't want to rethink it because that would be infidelity to the people they're responsible to. And to us, it just seems glaringly absurd to think, to believe something that is not susceptible to any kind of empirical verification just because somebody you like or respect respect said so. But that just flies right over the head. As Aristotle said, it's beyond the ability of most people to draw distinctions. And that remains true. They're not stupid, but they just are confused.
I was watching, and I recently edited a little clip that's going to go into my upcoming video on battling the gods. And I wanted to ask you some thoughts about Socrates' final, if you will, his trial that was going on. And he was accused of atheism even during this trial. But it sounds like, they viewed him as impious because he not only was questioning everything and bringing these questions, but he was harassing people, they were saying. And he said, I'm not going to stop doing what I do. So you're going to have to kill me. Technically, I guess that's just the way it is. You're a big fan of Socrates in many ways. Of course, more so probably than Plato, because Plato, his philosophy is obviously more... his Platonic philosophy, of course, don't get me wrong, it had a lot of influence in many ways, but Socrates has a lot of practical applications for skeptics like us who want to challenge and check things. Can you recall any more of his instances and some funny interactions he's had that you can recall off the top of your head?
Well, one of them was that he went to the oracle of Apollo at Delphi, and she had this plaque up above the door. It says, "Know thyself." And so I guess he asked her, what would you say about me? And she says, well, you're the wise. Oh, maybe he said, who's the wisest man in Athens? And she says, oh, you. And he said that can't be true. And he says, I'm afraid I'm going to have to prove it. So he went around interviewing all of these prominent people. And he didn't include artisans and artists and all that, because he said, well, they have talents that are just like Rush Limbaugh says, on loan from God. That doesn't take wisdom. It takes great skill, but that's a different thing. And so he would ask politicians and others various questions, and they revealed themselves to be obviously unwise. You only need to see televised recordings of Congress to see that they're just idiots. And I'm nonpartisan on that, by the way. I once told my daughters when they were little girls, I said, as you grow up, if you think that the world is run by morons, you're right. You're correctly perceiving it. Well, Socrates found out that this was true, and he finally says, son of a gun, the oracle was right. She always spoke in double entendres, so whatever happened was sort of right. He says, I guess I am the wisest man in Athens because I'm the only one that realizes he's not wise. And that's the basis of Socratic humility. My version of this is to tell students, you are wrong if you think, well, Bryce is a PhD, he must be right and everything. No, and I say getting a PhD is like getting a learner's permit. You begin to realize the vast cosmos of things you don't know and can never live long enough to know. But it helps to get you further on the course. So who knows how far you'll get. And that's Socratic humility, and that was his wisdom, to know that he wasn't really wise. Nobody deserved that distinction.
Can you recall, and maybe I'm going to ask Tim Whitmarsh when I interview him on his book, Battling the Gods, can you recall Socrates, and I don't know, I haven't read, that's why I'm asking, did he ever challenge atheists in the ancient world? I mean, he seemed more akin to one, even though he wasn't an atheist. According to his final trial, he admits, no, I didn't say that there isn't a God, are you accusing me of being an atheist? Because that's something in the recent edit that I did is found that the accusation is that he doesn't believe in the gods at all. And he's like, I never said that. Like this person who's an atheist. And he refers a name. So there's a guy who was an atheist and there's something. I mean, strict atheist, like by modern terms, atheist. Not like Romans using the accusation of atheism to Jews because they don't have a visible God. It's, at least by the time of the first century, they don't have an image in the temple and things like that, even though there are sources that do suggest, potentially, in Miletus and if I'm not mistaken, Miletus, but for sure Manetho and these other, writers who were talking about the Jewish temple possibly having an Apollo or some type of figure in the temple that was an image, like a horse or something. I say that to say, do you know of any encounters where he's dealt with that, or is it mainly other people?
I don't know the material well enough to say, but my impression was that he did believe. He spoke as if he believed in God, but he seemed to think it was like a muse almost, that his genius was a Latin word, I think, based on the Arabic, the jinn, the genies, same thing, that he had a kind of inner muse that would help him and show him things. He behaved as if he did believe in conventional polytheism, because on his deathbed, he said to one of his disciples, "I owe a cock, a rooster, to Asclepius." So he had offered he had promised a sacrifice to the healing god if he would heal somebody, Socrates or somebody else. If he was simply an atheist, would he have made a vow and wanted to be sure it was kept? I don't think so. And Plato believed in the conventional gods too, though they weren't the ultimate. The ultimate was the good, as Tillich would say, the God beyond God. But atheism was a tricky accusation. Christians were accused of being atheists because they didn't believe in the Roman gods, and they knew that Christians believed in a god. But
I guess that word gets really confusing in the context. Is important. Tim Whitmarsh's book is going to be interesting to interview him on that topic. I do think street epistemology, though, is interesting to ask people to think. And the Socratic method isn't necessarily that I'm giving you answers, but
that's right.
But that you are going to need to ask yourself if what you're believing makes really good sense. And can you imagine Socrates today walking around to Christian fundamentalists?
Yeah, apparently that's what your friend does.
Right.
I always loved the TV show and the movie The Paper Chase, where these first-year law students are taught by Professor Kingsfield, who seems to be an ornery, Olympian, merciless character, but it's all a front. And he says, "Here we use the Socratic method. I ask questions, I spin the tumblers of your mind, and I answer every question with another question." And that's exactly right, and that's a Socratic method. I think you can kind of tell Socrates was trying to get people to see his point, but he didn't just tell them. He asked leading questions, you might say. And he said his role was that of a midwife, that the truth was inside you, but you didn't necessarily know it until you could be induced to bring it out to delivery, for it to be born. It's in there. You're pregnant with it. And then Plato, on that basis, said, well, in that case, that means our souls pre-existed and get reincarnated, because when did we know these things that we're now remembering? And that's what recognition means, recognition. Yeah, and he showed him with Meno. He's this rich guy in Athens, and he's got a slave boy with him, and he's talking to Socrates, and Socrates says, "We remember what we learn." And he says, "Watch this," and he says, "Bring your slave boy over here." And he says, "Now take this stick, and in the dust draw this kind of figure, and then draw that one. What's going to be next?" And based on what he's done, the kid said, "Well, this ought to follow." That's right. How did you ever teach him math, Meno? No. Well, how did he know this? He must have learned it in a previous life. Now, whether Socrates gave that answer or Plato did, it's notoriously difficult to figure out. But that's the kind of thing he would do. Like, you ever notice this? Have you ever thought about this? Well, no, I guess not. I see what you mean there. And that's the whole thing. Don't just tell them, make them work for it, so it'll be their own discovery. Bye.